So at the point where we have let's assume that we are at the point where we have the 3D created the way that we want it, either annotated or not, doesn't matter, but we want to get a 2D. So sometimes just sketching up a 2D inside of the program, just using line and field regions, also takes time. So we can take the 2D out of the 3D that we created, simply by making a section through it. So if you go, for example, to a floor plan, let's say level 0, that's just to get a view from the top of it. We have an option to put out a section in a view tab. If you click on a view tab, oh, now I'm clicking a few times, so just close, sorry for that. In the view tab, you get a section. Also on the taskbar, right here, you also have a section to click. So if you click on this, you get an option to draw a line through which you want the section to go. So as I'm drawing, you see that it starts to create the line and the little head, so it points out in which way the section is gonna look into. Let's say that I want it to be somewhere here. I'm gonna cancel out of every single comment. And how to get to that section? Of course, you either have it in a project browser under the sections that you can navigate, or just double click the bubble and it's gonna get you to that view. And you can see it's the exact view of the model that we already created. You can see all of the elements cut through. So it's a good start for a 2D, right? You don't have to get all of the shapes right because you already have them. You just have to annotate on top of them. Of course, sometimes you have different things inside of your 3D key junctions. So, for example, I'm just gonna close every single windows except those two, level 0 and section. What you can do in a view tab, you go to tile view, or you can see two views at once. Meaning that, let's say that I want to take a certain part of my section inside of that view. So I can just quickly move, and you will see how the section view changes. So if there's a certain part that you want it to show, you can just quickly scroll through it. If you want to view something or something is not right, and get that right angle that you want, for example. So let me close it. I'm going to focus on the 2D. A lot of information in it, starting with soil, sand. You get the hatch patterns, for example. And there's two ways to do it. How to annotate properly, because everything needs to have a pattern. If it doesn't have a pattern, by default, like how people understand it, architects, it means that it's empty, right? So it can't be, if that's insulation, it can't be empty, because it is a material. Like here you have an air gap, so it can stay empty because that's just air, there's nothing there, right? So you have to make sure that every material has a hatching pattern. And either you can use Annotate tab right here to create regions, field regions. If you drop down, you get option of masking region and field region. And for example, you can just use one of those presets once. Or you can create your own by editing type, duplicating existing type of hatching. So I'm not gonna name anything, I'm just gonna show it how to do it. Okay, and you can check, change all sort of patterns inside of the Revit. So you can scroll through all of the patterns. If you click right here, diagonal crosshatch, you have a foreground field pattern. And you also click the three dots the same way as you open up materials. And you get a set of different hatchings. Some of them are named for you, like steel, sand, that you can use. But on some of those, you either have to assume yourself that, for example, you set that contour is gonna be diagonal up 3 minutes or something like that. That's how usually prefabricated, for example, is also marked up. So I just take this one as an example. Let's choose one. We're gonna hit OK to accept it with a new one. And we're in the same mode as we were when we were modeling. Oh, sorry if I pointed at you. In a sketch mode, meaning that right now we sketch a region that you want to be covered by that hatching. Okay. So let's take a rectangle tool. You can even define what kind of line will be the edges of the hatching, whether it wants to be thin line, a medium line, which is thicker, wide line, or invisible lines. That's your choice. You can specify it. Let's go with normal thin lines. rectangle, and I'm just gonna cover up that part. Even though it already has a hatching, I didn't notice, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna cover it up. Maybe let's say that it's gonna be a prefab and the rest is in situ, so it needs another hatching, right? Because otherwise it just be confusion that it's everything casted in situ. So we want to make it prefabricated. So I'm just gonna draw over it a sketch. It's the same view as you saw before. It's a sketch, you accept the check mark, and you get in the pattern that you wanted. It's specified. And you mark up everything, bricks, installations. Installation has a very specific type of annotations. It's a special one in Annotate. Installation. And you see there's a specific pattern that you set up the width. It was 190, for example, for that installation. So I'm gonna type in 190. And I'm gonna set to the middle of this wall. I'm just gonna drag it down and click. And you see it's getting out a nice installation pattern. For example, we, from first semester, we received from one of our teacher also a family for marking up installation. We can share it with you, of course, and it's just a different hatching. I'll show you how to do that. And you can, if something is not inside of Revit, some families, you can always import it into the Revit. All sort of annotations, you can create them your own if you know how to. If you want to import something existing that you downloaded from, for example, from the internet or you created yourself, you go to Insert tab and you click Load Family. I'm just gonna quickly navigate to the family I was talking about. Sorry. Nope. Right here, I'm just gonna open the family. I'm gonna click Annotate, Component, and the family that I just loaded showed up right here. It's an installation. I'm gonna give you an example. It looks like this. Usually, you distinguish hatchings for installation, like for example, whether it's a rigid installation. Usually, it's either marked up by those or by. Can you open up your notebook? Usually on the templates, it's also marked up this way. Yeah. But for example, software installations like Rockwool, they have a little bit different markings. Like for example, this one. So also try to distinguish, like the same way like you distinguish types of concrete, prefabricated in situ, rigid installation, soft installation. So you know you have a difference. You see on the drawings that that's a different type of installation. So try to use a more variation of your annotations. We can share this family with you. We got it, of course, from school, so it's not really a big deal. Other way, if you create sections from 3D model, what you can do, you can specify, because you're cutting from an existing object that has a material applied to it. So one way to get the hatchings done is to actually edit the material. I'm just gonna go inside of one of the group. I'm gonna click on the brick, and I'm gonna edit the existing material that we created earlier. Till this point, we are only focused on appearance tab, because that's the 3D view, the realistic appearance that you get when you render or when you see the 3D view. But right now, let's say that we're gonna go to the graphic tab, which is important for 2Ds and for 3D views, but not realistic, but like shaded, consistent color, and hidden lines. Because that's where the pattern that's gonna show up is specified and the color of it in consistent and shaded views. So you can even specify right here what sort of pattern an element will have, a material will have when you cut it. If I go as an example to the part where I saw a cast concrete precast, it has a pattern there because it's specified inside of the material, you see? So it has a cut pattern, foreground, and it's specified right here. Therefore, when I cut it, it receives that pattern automatically. So you can set it up yourself for the materials that you created. I'm gonna take as an example the brick material. I'm gonna take cut pattern, foreground, and I'm gonna choose a pattern. There's a specific pattern which is called brickwork. I'm gonna take it as an example. And let's, I don't know, set it to completely black. I usually take it a little bit lighter, for example, so it doesn't take too much attention, because you have the cutting like around and the pattern inside. So if it's like a bit shaded, it's not so it doesn't look so aggressive to your eyes. And if I'm gonna accept it, it should start changing. You see that the brick received pattern, and that is the case, stupid case that's happened before. That those bricks are bound to the reference plane, so they will keep going back to that reference plane. So I'm just gonna undo that to avoid it. Oh yeah. Another way how to make the hatching regions. I don't know what is better for you. If you like to, if you're gonna make a few sections, or you're gonna use the same material in different 3D key junctions, and you're gonna try to get the 2D out of all of those, then I guess the better way to do it would be to specify it inside of the material, because then every time you cut it, you get the pattern straight away. You don't have to annotate it, right? But it's also a good way to do it by field regions.
If you don't change your design. So what happens is that if you change your design at this stage, let's say that you put 5 bricks, the field region that you did manually in the view will not update to the new design.
Exactly.
The idea is that we do everything automatic. So if we cut the material, the pattern will be there always. It doesn't matter if you change the design or not; it will be always correct. So as a starting point, I would choose the material section.
Always remember that everything you cut has a pattern, and for example, important part of reinforcement is that in general, when you cut reinforcement, it's considered to be that reinforcement should have just plain black pattern for reinforcement, right? So I'm just gonna go inside of that reinforcement. I'm gonna edit material. I'm gonna choose the cut pattern, solid fill, okay, and it's black, so I want to accept black, and it should be black right here. Oh, it's not black probably because it's not cut. I just try to cut it out. Okay, and there you go. Yeah, if it's not cut, then it will try to show something behind it, therefore a lack of pattern. And you can see there's also a reinforcement there going, which is not visible in the 2D drawing, but it's there in the 3D, right? It's important to also show it. And since it's hidden, we mark it up as it's behind, like it's hidden with hidden lines. So I would go to Annotate, Detail Line, change the line style, and I would go with Hidden. I'm not sure if that's the correct one. Is that the green? No, it's the black one. Okay. And just mark it up with a simple lines that there's a reinforcement going on right there. Can you see that? That is hidden. It's behind the construct. It's hidden inside of it, but it's there. It's important to specify it. And it's the same way with the stirrups around the reinforcement in the foundation. We have to show that something is there, because if you look at the 2D drawing right now, someone's gonna say, yeah, but it has no right to exist, like it won't work. You have to show it that something is there. A good way to annotate, what a teacher from second semester, Gabi, told us, is to, if you try to imagine what to put on the 2D drawing, it's to follow the ribbon. First of all, it's dimensions. Do you want dimensions on the drawing? Probably yes. So you take dimension, for example, aligned, and you start dimensioning. I'm gonna hit tab to get to that line, and you start dimensioning your drawing. Right? You can of course edit the dimension, edit type, and specify all sorts of features of the dimension to make it appear the way that you want it to be. You follow more. You have all the types of dimensions, radial, wave, into diameter of some reinforcement, etc., etc. Therefore, you get details. You want detailed lines, whether you need to mark something up like reinforcement, or you want to use field regions to mark something that is cut but it doesn't show the pattern, or it's just like a one-time use. You can get components, this was just family created as a component. So you can load multiple components and detail it with components as well. There can be, for example, like some sort of connection that comes directly from Revit. If you go to Insert and you load families, and I'm just gonna skip to the library, it should open up by default, and you got detail items, and you got all sorts of annotations predefined by Revit. You can look through them, you can use them, you don't have to, you can create your own. It's just a matter, if you know that something is there, you can speed up your work by using components, and it's a very good practice to do that. Let's get back to the Annotate tab. And the rest is installation. Revision Cloud is just a cloud that is used for drawings, 2D drawings of plans, for example, that for during construction site that something was supposed to be there or will be there, and they have to check that there's a change in that particular place. So it's not really relevant for us right now in this drawing. And then, of course, comes up with the text that you have to annotate your own drawing to specify the names of each materials, what it is right now, because you just see a patterns, you can think of what it is, but then you have to make either a list with numbers or just direct annotation, like on a 3D. Excuse me, to tell the one who is reading what kind of material it is. For annotation category, that would be it from the importance part. Of course, you can play one thing very important. If you go to Modify tab, there's a tool which is called Line Work. Right here, Line Work. You can also play around with this feature. It's basically, I'm just gonna check, for example, white line, and it will start changing all sorts of lines that I click on, from thin lines, if it was thin line, to the particular one that I chose. So you can also edit this way. Or a nice practice is changing graphics by elements. So if you select something, you can right click on it, you can overwrite graphic in a view. So it's gonna be only view specific, it does not show up in any other views, just this one. And you can do it either by elements or by category of the elements. So if you choose wall category, it's gonna change it to every single wall that is inside of that view. Or let's go by elements. And you get something that you saw in a material view. You can also specify cut patterns. You can specify cut lines, meaning how thick is gonna be the lines that are cut through. You can even specify whether it's gonna be transparent or no in this view. And a surface pattern, meaning that if it's not cut, it can also have a pattern. It's just gonna show up on the face of the object. For example, if you have wall which is made out of brick, you can specify a brick pattern, and it's gonna show up on the face of the wall, and you're gonna see that it's a wall made out of brick, for example. A lot of options to play with, very useful. You can give it a try. The principle of putting it out on a title blocks is the same. If I'm gonna create by the way, I don't know if I showed you, just right click on the sheets, you create a new one, and you check the family that you want to use, and it creates a new title block. Of course, you name it properly, how it's supposed to be, and the principle is the same. You take a section from the project browser and you just drag it over to the title block. So that's a big one. It's 1 to 5. I think you're supposed to have 1 to 5s. Then you either make the section smaller, all the elements inside of it, to fit it. Either you make a break line through it, and you split these. Have you been introduced to break line? How to split drawings to make them smaller? Oh yeah, so I've just quickly mentioned it. Maybe. Yeah. Oh yeah. So for example, like you have this one is actually short foundation.
Cut the top. Cut the top. So
the top. Okay. Yeah. So like let's say that there's something continuous there, right? And you want to show that it's continuing and is the same thing for a certain period of time at least. You go to Annotate, Components. Whether I need to check whether it's by default imported. It's called break line. It doesn't. Okay, so you have to find it inside of your Revit library. So instead of Googling for it, insert load family. Yeah, I'm gonna go to metric library. It's contained inside of detail items, annotations, and it's right here, detail item break line. And that is very useful family because this marks up that that's not the end of a drawing. Because if you would show something like that, someone would think that, okay, so the wall goes up to here, and then it stops, and this installation goes up to here and it stops, and the wall is up to here and it stops, right? So because that's how they interpret the drawing. So you put a break line on it, Just gonna click. I'm gonna extend it. It means that there's something more above. It's just not shown because either it's not relevant or it's repetitive or something like that. So make sure to use them to mark up like the endings of the drawings that you show when you make a little call out of that part. So it would be here and here as well, because it's also continuous, right? What you can do, if the foundation would be slightly longer, I'm just gonna drop it down a bit and move the dimension closer so I can fit the drawing inside of the 2D. You see those little lines? They are very annoying, so I'm just gonna tell you how to get rid of those. If you click on the dimension and edit type, you have an option, witness line control, and it's by default it's cap to element. Change it to fix the dimension line and click OK, and it's gonna get rid of those lines going through the reference plane, so we get just 3 dimensions. Let's move. All right, let's move close enough. And now let's say that I can fit at least most of the drawing for the purpose of presentation. Of course, the title line. You can click on it to move it. Just move inside of the drawing. Yeah, and if you have, for example, foundation, which is going very deep, and it's basically the same, what you can do, you can put 2 break lines and cut out a middle part of the drawing. Let's imagine that the foundation is going up to here. So you can put 1 break line here, 1 break line here, and cut this out and put it closer. Because it's the same thing, it's just repetitive. And then you just make annotation that this one is on level minus 1500 and this one is level 0, for example. Because there's no sense of showing too much on the drawing what repeats itself. There's no point. So make sure that it's like as little as it's possible, but yet readable. Alright, 2 ways of annotating. Text annotating the drawing. You can do it the same way as you did as I showed with 3D. Meaning that you can just put a text directly to it. Or what I find more better for 2D drawings is to put a text and, for example, a number. Let's say that it's going to be a number 1. Make that line align, whatever, how it's going to set up. And you create a text without arrows, and you make a list of it. For example, number 1, it's going to be reinforced in C2 slab, as an example, and make a list, and you just put it somewhere in a corner, for example, of the drawings. Because sometimes if the drawing is quite complex and you want to annotate everything, like a text which would take this much of a drawing, it's not very practical, right? If you have like 50 elements or something, then the text would just not fit. So you use numbers and you put it out in a list. And it's the same principle, like try to keep the annotations aligned somewhere either around the object or on the side. So they just don't go all over the place. They do not cross each other, at least if it's possible for them to not cross each other, because it can create confusion. And make sure that the object that they point at is clear that annotation is pointing at slab, instead of, if you would just put it somewhere here, you could be confused whether it's pointing at the reinforcement or a slab. So make sure that they are accurate. It's the same way with 2D as 3D. You might put a key indicator to show where it's placed and how it's placed. That's something to add?
Let's print.
Let's print. Oh yeah. I'm just gonna hide this box. You usually have also a crop region to work with views. You can that little box. If it's not visible, I'm sorry, I know it's just showing up something. You can turn it on right here by clicking this little bubble. If this disappears or no. And simply you can crop everything like that reference line. Like I don't want to see it there, it's not needed, so I can just crop it up to that point. And I can just hide it. Okay, how to print. It's quite easy thing. you would think, but sometimes there are a lot of mistakes. To get a good printout, you want the title block to fill out the whole paper, the whole page, right? Because sometimes it happens that even though a title block is here, like for some reason, because of wrong settings, you have another frame, like right, it doesn't fill out the paper. The frame, it does not align with the side, the edge of the paper, right? It's not really pleasant to look at. And as Anne said a couple of times, that on a presentation, if you put something like that, then she just keeps saying that it's like looking first into one frame, then into the other frame, then into the third frame, and it just doesn't look so good. So I'm gonna show you how to avoid something like that. Go to File, we click on Print, and you get dialog box. First of all, you specify what views or sheets you want to print, print range. You can print current window, visible portion of current window, or select as views, etc. If you select this one, you can specify what you want to be printed out. You can uncheck views, so only the title blocks will left. And I'm sorry. That's gonna be the last one if I'm not mistaken, with the 2D. So I'm just gonna print out this one. I'm gonna hit OK. Do you want to save it? You can also save your settings, meaning like, for example, you have outline proposal drawings, sections, right? So you can only, if you want only print out sections and you know that you're gonna do it a couple of times, you can mark up only the sections and you can save as, and you can specify it's gonna be OP sections. And instead of selecting it every time you want to print out, you just use the drop down window and you select it, and it selects itself by automatically, right? Time saver, if you know that you're gonna use it a couple of times. I'm just gonna uncheck that. I'm gonna hit OK. No, I don't want to save those options. And now we get, oh, and I just unchecked it, sorry. Let's check. The important part of the setup of the page settings default. You click setup, and that's where the fun begins. You can choose also to save some sort of templates. If you find one that suits you, you can save it and then use it inside of the drop-down window. The paper, you have to specify what kind of paper you want to print it on. If you use title block like me, which was A3, it was specified it's A3. Use the A3. If you use the A1, use the A1, obviously, because that's how it creates the frames inside of the paper, etc., etc. So you have to make sure that the size of the title block equals the size of the paper that you print on. Paper placement, always choose offset from the corner with no margin. So it means that we'll push it to the corner as much as it's possible. And instead of fit to page, because we do drawings which are scaled, and it's important to have them in the scale that it was drawn, 1:5 in this example, make sure that you do not choose fit to page, because then it will start scaling it down or up. Click zoom and make it 100%, so you get the exact dimensions in scale 1:5 in this example, as they should be when you print out. So if you take a ruler and you're gonna measure it, it's gonna be a proper measurement. Orientation of the page, we have a landscape. If you have portrait, of course you have to change it. Raster quality, this one is used for printing out raster images, meaning the rendering that we created, for example. So always set it to the highest, I guess. It's the best outcome. And colors, of course, that you want to print out the color. A lot of additional options, whether you want to show, for example, reference planes on the drawings, etc., etc. Scope boxes, meaning, for example, that box, crop box that I hid. You can, of course, specify whether you want it or no. And you accept it by clicking OK. From the important part, I guess that's all we wanted. So I'm just going to click OK to print it. And there's option, or important option, if you have a couple of the drawings, usually, and you want to hand it in to a teacher, or to show it on evaluation, or to your boss later, it's going to be very annoying if you're going to hand in 10 drawings, each in separate file, right? That's not cool. So you have an option to combine multiple selected views of title blocks into a single file. That's very useful, and use it as often as it's possible. So now I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna specify what I wanted. Let's say that it's gonna be someone on my desktop. Click Save, and it's gonna start printing the drawing. If you have, for example, rastered images, I mean the renderings, that is on other title blocks, it can take a while. In this case, it should be fast, but my Adobe tends to stop work from time to time, so I just cancel it out. I'm just gonna print now again, and it should work. Yeah, there you go. And that's what I wanted. You see, the frame of the title block is perfectly aligned with the paper, and you get everything as it should be. If you would print it out right now, and you take a ruler in scale 1 to 5, the dimension should be proper as you drew it on your own paper by hand. As an example, what I wanted to avoid, I'm going to open up this window again, and I will show you that I will make a fit to page, and I will just page center, and for example, I will, I don't know, instead of this page zoom color, but I'll take like A2, for example, which is bigger. You see, if you take a wrong size of the paper, and then that's what's gonna come out. If you would click fit to page, it would still be on the full size of the paper, but if you would print it out, it would not be in a scale 1 to 5. And that's what we aim for. We want the proper scale because it's 2D drawing, it's a constructional drawing or architectural. It needs to be in a proper scale, so that's important. Make sure to get all of those settings right. So just to repeat, we go in a print window, settings, setup. It's gonna be offset from corner, no margin, and it's gonna be zoom 100%. That's the settings that you pretty much always aim for, and the right size of the paper, in this case A3. And this way you can print a really good drawing.